everybody again. Christine, nice to see you again. And so last few weeks we've been talking about the AI governance, um, and we're talking a lot about the orchestration. And I felt that there's so much to talk about. I've just written a white paper that I'm about to submit on how do we bring all of these areas together, or unification of AI governance, which will be talking through this month. But I wanted to start this process in terms of almost a recognition I came to last week, when I was doing AI governance training, where I kept on referring to data quality, and lots of people were uncomfortable with the concept of data quality, because if we look at an LLM, or if we look at an AI model, and we then talk about predictions and forecasting. Is it really data quality? It's probably moved on somewhat from the input data to now the output results. And so is it a data quality? And so I've readjusted my understanding and definition to call it, to almost to go back to the basics of total quality management. And that's what Stewart and Deming created, was this total quality management. They didn't call it data quality. We introduced the concept of data quality. And I think we've lost a little bit of that understanding. Now, part of what also challenged me was talking to someone that's doing a lot of work on LLMs and chatbots. They refer to something which they call evaluation-driven development. And I'd like to share a little bit of that with you in terms of how that changes some of the areas and how we can integrate it into total quality management. Okay, so that's some of the background, and just to do a quick introduction on total quality management. Remember, it was all about manufacturing and process, and the ability to create products that were better than what they were. And the 14 points from Deming, he spoke about a whole lot of things like ceasing mass inspection at the end. So when the car came to the end of its cycle, then they do a mass inspection. But if something went wrong, the cost of fixing was really big. So he felt that we needed to do quality checks all the way along. Um, and he also came up with that concept of, if we could improve and standardize the quality of our raw materials, and then make sure that the processes are consistent, then we would produce consistent outputs. So it was all about consistent quality inputs, consistent process, and that would give us consistent products. And he built all of those things like check sheets and things like that to understand where the processes were going wrong. Okay. Um, Now, I've specifically defined this as information and AI products. Initially, I had data products there, but to me, any product that we deliver, we should be focusing on the total quality of this product. So um, now, what's interesting is, when we start off, we should be discussing with the consumer what product they want. I don't know if you remember, that's what Deming was actually all about, was saying, let's understand exactly what the quality, the product that they want, and then let's build a product for their needs, not the other way around. Like, let's build a product and then hope they come and buy it. I remember Deming's write-up where he actually said he was put in charge. He became the CEO of a fast food business, and they were doing really badly. They were losing market share, and he then went and applied his learning on with the Japanese manufacturers. He applied his learning there, and he then first of all started with, talking to the customer, having those voice of the customer interviews, to understand what the problem was. And he discovered then that the food was bad. The taste of the burgers were bad. And that was basically because they were awarding uh, contracts to the suppliers of meat based on price and not based on good quality inputs. So he restructured a lot of those issues and he perfected this plan, do, check, act as part of the process. But he recognized that it's about starting with the consumer. What are their requirements? What is it that they need? Now, this creates a little bit of a challenge for us because a lot of the times, for example, in the FNOL, that first notice of loss, we're doing a lot of the AI systems based on business requirements, um, speeding up the process of and reducing the number of people that are involved around an insurance claim. And where we have to be careful, and that was a message that came through clear from the lawyer who told us about the EU AI Act, is we have to balance business efficiencies and business value with customer benefits. So how do we map these two together? And how do we ensure that we're getting the right solution? Okay, so we do the planning and the requirements, and then we look at ensuring quality control of these products that we are providing to the consumer to meet their requirements. That's what quality control is all about. And then we look at quality assurance, which is ensuring that the materials coming in and the process, so are the parts and the processes within the tolerances? Okay, so are we creating the product in the appropriate way? And the next step was when we are getting these failures, both from the assurance side and the control side, that we can do a root cause analysis of the reported failures. So this is bringing both sides together. And then finally, we have the quality monitoring across all of the different areas. So we need to monitor all of these different things, but very helpful to understand who you're talking to, what you're looking at these different areas, and then bringing the total quality together to produce a product that the customer likes, and the customer is interested in. All right, and so the thing I like about this is that a lot of times people, when we talk about data quality, they think we're just sitting at these raw materials and the thing going into the AI model. Okay, that's where we make a big mistake. It's not just about the data quality that's going in. It has to be about the quality of everything that we are doing. Okay, so my advice is let's stop calling it data quality and let's call it total quality. And the raw materials, be they from database tables or be they from documents or from wherever we get them, videos, whatever it is, it's about that quality control of the data going into the machine, into the model. Okay. I just want to pause there. Are any questions, observations? I was when I sat and looked at all of these things again about how to work on quality, total quality, I found it a lot more appealing than just data quality. Any comments? ST, industrial engineering. I suppose this is you spend a lot of your time in this area. And do the industrial engineers still refer to this total quality management, or what are the words that they use? I think you're mute, ST. Sorry, that machine isn't plugged in. Now it's on mute.
And now unmute?
Yes, now I can hear you.
Okay. Yes, still TQM. It depends on those, like certain big corporations kind of gives a program like this their own name.
Right.
So then it would be called something else. But TQM, I would definitely know what you mean.
All right. And it was really interesting because when I was talking to this LLM developer, he was saying, yes, the data is important and it must be good, but our important thing is this LLM doing the job that the consumer wants it to do? And it was quite interesting because he said he's working with a marketing company, and their brief was that this LLM had to be creative. It had to make things up. And we always trying to get the LLM to stop making things up or stop hallucinating, and they wanted to be very creative. So they've almost got their temperature setting to be on the other side of the scale compared to what we do. So he was quite concerned about us trying to control all of this stuff, all this quality. And he said the sign of a good LLM for these people was very different to anybody else's LLM. And he was very nervous of like putting in these data quality dimensions of completeness and consistency and things like that. He felt that that was a bit inhibiting. Okay, let's go through that. So one of the things I developed, and we'll be talking about the AI implementation framework, is the ability to look at these different approaches. Now, CRISP-DM has been going on for many years in terms of data mining. And one of the challenges that people are saying about CRISP-DM is that it's still somewhat of a waterfall model. We get the business understanding. We then go and look for the right data understanding. We prepare the data, we model the data, we evaluate it. And when it fails, we go back to the business understanding. We may not go into deployment. So there's been quite a few challenges around CRISP-DM in terms of saying, well, it's still this waterfall model, and we don't really bring in the agile approach. And there are a few people that have proposed this idea of CRISP-DM++. So yeah, I haven't been paying attention to the lobby. A few people. Okay, so CRISP-DM++ is trying to get away from the waterfall approach, but I think it's pretty hard with this data modeling approach, because you collect the data, you go through the model, you work on lots and lots of iterations around the model, trying to find the features, and then trying to get it to do the job that you need it to do. And if it's working, or if it's got the appropriate error rate or the reduced error rate, then it will go into deployment. Agile is not a thing within this. So then along the next journey was what they talk about, evaluation-driven development. Okay, and here's something that they're using specifically for agentic AI and LLMs. So the idea is they pick up a problem, they build a prototype, and they basically recommend that you go into a no-code approach on the prototype. You do not want to be spending a whole lot of time doing this. Get it out as quickly as possible and get some feedback. And when you understand that feedback, then you can start defining your performance metrics. Okay, so there are some challenges around that in terms of trying to get your performance metrics done too quickly. Okay, then we go and they define evals. They call them evals. Sorry, it's just some feedback coming from somebody. Okay. Okay, thanks, Paul. All right, so they have this concept called evaluations. How do we evaluate the system? And to do this, they build an observability platform of the agentic system. And they talk about online evals and offline evals. Online evals would be, whilst the system is providing recommendations, there's a level of evaluation. And offline would be this idea of running a trace. So as the agentic system or LLM is engaging with the user, there's a trace of all of the interactions. So then what they would do was they would actually evaluate these traces, and they would provide some feedback. And interestingly enough, what they're doing is that they're using LLMs as a judge It's actually evaluating these traces, it's evaluating the responses, and it's basically giving a simple output. For example, if you have a requirement to look after toxicity, is the agent starting to communicate in a negative way or in a bad way? And you need a real-time LLM so that every response that the agent gives, you have a quick toxicity check and say, this is toxic, do not share it with the user. So this thing's getting very complicated and there's all sorts of challenges. So they've built this concept of evaluations. How do we evaluate all of this thing, and then how do we monitor on the production? And how do we present the alerts back to the users or the system developers? Yeah.
Hello? Yeah.
Okay, so that's eval driven. It's a new way of doing the development. I quite like it. And then we've got this total quality management. So these are all the different inputs that I got to build an implementation framework. And then if you remember last week or the week before, I think I shared about the Wang Strong framework, and that was dealing with AI quality dimensions and data product dimensions. So we've got typical data would be accuracy, timeliness, completeness, representational, accessibility, and then the AI ones were objectivity. So am I being objective is my model objective, or does it have biases? Believability, are they reasonable, or can it be explained? So if I detect an anomaly, can I explain why I've rejected this person's request? Reputational issues, appropriate amount of data. Remember, the EU AI Act is saying that you have to have enough data to ensure that you don't have that you provide the appropriate judgments. Okay. And you can't have too little data. There we found a contradiction between GDPR and LLMs, where the AI needs lots and lots of data, and GDPR is saying minimize, as little data as possible. Okay, so some contradictions there. So all of these things come together, and we need to put a framework together on how to work with it. So this is data mining. This is LLM or agentic frameworks. Then we've got total quality, where we need to look at everything, and we need a set of dimensions to be able to express what the user wants and how do we look at the quality of the user's input. Okay. Now, before we go any further, I'd just like to differentiate between a governance framework and an implementation framework. These two are not the same. The governance framework tells you how to set up a program on data governance, and this is specifically for AI governance, the types of people involved and the types of things, whereas implementation framework is about how do we deliver a successful AI model, product, whatever it is. How do we get the right information products that we're dealing with? So please don't mix these two together. This is going to be done by AI project, and this is done at an enterprise level, and enterprise and project. We need both of those. Okay, now in looking at some of the challenges we have with building agentic AI, one of the things that really struck me was that LLM agents are non-deterministic. Software is deterministic. So software, we can do that test-driven development. We can set all the test cases, and we can see how badly the software performs according to the test cases. So that was relatively easy. There are unit tests are deterministic, and we can do some integration testing. When we come on to agents and LLMs, we're in a different game. Okay. So LLM agents are non-deterministic. They can have multiple paths. If we think of a conversation, we can't define, or it's really hard to define a single conversation. If we do define a conversation, then we run the risk of implementing a chatbot, and basically it takes you through all of these steps, and they're well defined, but they can get very frustrating because they may mean nothing to you, or they're not addressing your concern. So that's the problem we have with this LLM and chatbots and conversational AI. Okay. Now, also the thing that we have with agents is that improving the agents relies on better data, more data that we want to get. And this is not the same as software testing. So the problem we have with that is, remember, those systems can sit there and only when we have sufficient data, sufficient understanding, does it go into deployment. So it's not like a BI product where we define the quality of the product and we test it and we confirm that everything's right and everything's accurate and we can go into production. Okay. AI and agents and LLMs are not that situation. So we've got these challenges that we need to resolve. Okay. Now, it's helpful to understand the type of challenges we face. We all know about hallucination and accuracy, but there's also cost issues in terms of the amount of tokens, the time period that it takes. Paul Krobel and I were talking to someone in Saudi on one of the educational departments, his Department of Education, and they said they had a problem with their chatbot that was too slow. The LLM was taking too long to answer, and people were getting frustrated. Now, I don't know if you've seen, if you've worked with the chatbot. I've had some interesting experiences lately, and they start putting in those dot things. Or what they were doing was they had the chatbot say and I'm waiting, or things like that, waiting for the response to come back from the LLM before they gave the answer back to the user. So latency is quite a challenge that you face with LLMs. Problem definition missteps. So you have a cool demo that remember that no code thing, but it doesn't really address the issues. Black box building. So we just create all of these different things, and we don't know when it fails. We don't know exactly what caused the failure. And I was listening to someone who was presenting on the creation of an LLM. They say they've got this concept called a collapse, where the LLM, after it's like we're improving it, and then it just collapses and it can't perform anything. So it was an interesting approach. Scope creep, integration with legacy systems, that's difficult. Security and the data, the PII. Everybody's concerned about this LLM and what information does it remember about me. And especially when we're building a chatbot to collect PII, well, where's this information being managed? Where is it available? It's not like a database where we can see, here's all the PII that I've collected. It's sitting in a vector database. And then, of course, change management. Any questions or comments on the challenges with building agentic AI or LLM? Just want to pause there. Would anyone like to ask any questions about? Yes, ST.
Almost like, because it's so almost fundamentally different to how we are used to it. So should we be thinking about, I want to call it rules, not necessarily rules, differently? Like, we are expecting a certain thing and now it's not possible. Do we have to, or should we be trying to make AI fit that mold that we're used to, or just kind of be like, for something like personal data, we can't just ignore it, but it works differently. So yeah, it's just tough to think about.
It is quite a tricky one, and there's a comment here made by someone, is that generic metrics like hallucination and toxicity miss some of the domain specific issues. For example, with that marketing LLM. So what they do find is they almost get the model up and running, and then they look at what are the problems that this model is generating. So they're doing almost a retrofitting the data, the quality to the model once the model's operational. So it's quite hard sometimes to, and we always been taught that quality depends on the consumer. we must get their rules, and then we must make sure that the data fits the rules. Okay, now this is our challenges. When we need to define some level of quality, so we should not be bringing data into the LLM if it doesn't have that appropriate level of quality. So we've got quality checks of the data coming in, but the responses of the LLM are slightly different. So I think it's helpful, SD, to keep the rules where they are appropriate. So for data coming in, these are the appropriate rules. Does the data have any biases? Does the data have any PII? And then when you go into the interaction with the user or the customer, then you have to understand where the possible challenges are and what you need to do to avoid those challenges and issues.
Cool.
Okay. Cool.
I was just wondering what you said about the LLM collapsing after a while. Why does that happen, and how do you keep it from happening?
Are you talking about where I mentioned the collapse of the LLM?
Yes. Yes.
Yes. So if they overtrain that LLM in terms of trying to make it deal with issues like toxicity and hallucination and PII and things like that, when you try to make sure that there is no hallucination, then what you can get is you're almost reducing that vector search. Remember we spoke about the vector search in terms of how close is green to red and stuff like that. And when you try to prevent that hallucination, well, then it can't answer anything. It then goes into like a pretty dumb mode. So that's part of the challenges with that collapse. When you try to put too much constraint on it, it doesn't help. So sometimes what we're finding people do is don't try to restrict the LLM too much, rather try to restrict the inputs and the control of the context. So give it the context that you want and you prompt it with a very strict thing, but not to try to control the LLM too much. Does that help you?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay. Christy, I saw your hand up. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, so I mean, we're in the middle of this right now. We're actually doing a huge workshop in the middle of this month with AWS to learn how to build the agents. And so SD had a very similar question to mine, and you did answer it. But I also wanted to tag on to Ashley's question about research. That would be wonderful if you have anything regarding this evaluation-driven development.
Yes, I do. I've got a whole presentation and things like that, and I've got references as well. So I can certainly share a lot of that with you. Okay, great. Ashley, is that okay? I sorry, I didn't see your question.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I didn't want to disrupt everything. It was more the end if you're able to share.
Yeah, and then I can actually, if you are looking for someone to talk to, there's someone I spent a lot of time talking and helping me build this slide. There's a guy by the name of Jonathan from Jakarta, and I can share his details as well if people are interested.
Yeah, that would be amazing. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Pleasure. Okay. So what I've tried to do now, and I work together with Jonathan to be able to say, well, we still have to define a quality for the user. That quality can change. It can be radically different. One wants lots of hallucination. One doesn't want any hallucination. So we built what we refer to as a rubric. I don't know if any of you, Christy may know that from an education point of view. Sorry, Christy, I'm sure you know a rubric.
Oh yes, rubrics are very, very, very well known throughout every area of our entire institution.
Now, that's a perfect quality system. So if you can, so I'll show you the Excel that I used. So here's the evaluation thing. I'll put this, there it is. That's the link to this reference. Putting it in, okay. Oh, sorry, I'll have to resolve that page. Now, this was a rubric that I've created, and you'll see it in my presentation. That's there's the total quality rubric. So basically what it does is it understands what is the business outcome, what is the business trying to achieve. We want to catch all fraud cases. What is the value to the customer? So I really like this balance between what's the business trying to achieve and what's the benefit to the customer. If there's no benefit to the customer, I think we need to ask ourselves some questions. And this is the process step, and then this is the rubric criterion. Now, what was nice with that is I could build this TQM rubric format, and then what I did was I said, okay, when I build a HIPAA review of quality, what would HIPAA require that I don't have? And then I'd say, all right, this is the missing rubric. And then I went on to ISO 42000. What's the gap on ISO 42000 and on RMF? So I kept on building this rubric of quality that we required, and then enhanced the complete rubric to get it all right. Yeah. So that was quite interesting to see how we bring rubric into this process as well. Okay, so the basic process, of course, is plan, do, study, / check, act. Okay, now this study was really about analyzing the root causes. So remember, with this hallucination, we're going to be playing with the model, and then we're going to study its responses. We have to study the traces that it goes through and say, well, is it following the right trace of path, or is it giving bad responses or insufficient detail or insufficient instructions? What is it doing? We need to study it around this process. Okay, so there's the high-level process, and these are the different steps that we suggest that you go through. So first phase is understanding the needs and the quality, and helpful to go through the voice of the customer, interviews, surveys. Are we giving them the right value? Do they get frustrated with the chatbot? There's lots of engagements like that. Now, lately, we've seen some responses from the bank that we bank with, and every now and again, what they do is that they, to reduce the cost of humans in the loop, validating that this is a fraudulent transaction, they basically send us an automated response saying, did you do this and this and this? And it's really weird to get this telephone call with an automated person asking us to approve a transaction. Okay, so let's listen to the customer. Let's talk to them before we start sending them or introducing them into the loop without them knowing about it. Of course, I'd like to help, and I'd like to check that this is not a fraudulent transaction, but talking to a machine is not really pleasant. Set the business goals, define critical to quality characteristics that impact the customer, measurable quality targets for the FNOL. So what is the appropriate target for this FNOL, and document acceptance criteria and appropriate AI outputs. Now, that FNOL or anomaly detection is pretty easy. From the AI output, the AI either says, fine, we're comfortable with your claim, let's approve your claim. Or, no, we're not comfortable with your claim, let's go to a human. Or it's a case of this thing is so high, so risky, we actually have to have a higher level of risk analysis and evaluation. Okay. Our problem comes in is when the human gets introduced to the loop, there's a delay. Okay. So that means we may only get our response in 3-4 days. Now, we did mention this in the previous discussions. If I need to bury a family member, is that delay? How long is that delay? What is this? The SLAs around coming back and that human being able to explain and give us an answer. So those are the types of things that we need to look at. Okay. So define the metric standards and rubric. Build a comprehensive evaluation rubric. And I was trying, hopefully I'm trying to share this with you, is to say, I started with a rubric. Then I brought in, because this was due to medical situations, I had to bring in HIPAA and say, what am I missing from a HIPAA point of view, and then an AI system point of view, and then an AI RMF or risk management framework, an EU AI Act, and then I went to documents. So what document management principles do I need to apply to this information that I'm submitting? When we do an insurance claim and I take photographs and I take a statement from the police, I've got all of these documents that I'm bringing in, or records. They're not documents, they're records, and we need to understand that. So this is an ARMOR rubric, and I'm gonna just pause there for a while, and just to see whether people are sort of following the process that we need to go through with this. You will start off with the business requirements and the customer value, but then you're going to start checking frameworks, compliance rules, and stuff like that to ensure that you've got it. And these are the possible frameworks that you may be looking at and trying to understand. Any questions? Okay. All right. So that rubric takes a while, and I also hope that we recognize that it's not a once-off thing. This thing's going to be happening over and over, and as we observe something, as we observe messages or things that the LLM is doing, we're going to have to adjust and see, well, how do we resolve this issue? Okay, so there's an example of a rubric. And the scoring guideline is actually quite difficult. It's not like, it's not like completeness and things like that, where you give a score and the error rate. Here we talk about a 1 is the key records are missing and hard to retrieve. So if we need to look at the records using an AI governance in terms of logging and archiving, can I get the records from the system that was submitted? And can I get the answers from the LLM? So 3 is most records were accessible, and a 5 is 100% of the records are quickly retrievable. So for this decision that was made, where are the appropriate documents? And remember, this AI system, LLM, is building all of this stuff, and it needs to keep a record for us so that when we come back and say, oh, you rejected this person's claim, give me all the details, give me all the records that were submitted, help me piece all of this stuff together. Okay, different retention policies. The systems has to, of course, get rid of some of the documents depending on the time frames. And then we've also got compliance ratios with policies and audits. And then we've got a completeness. That's sort of what our completeness was looking like. Remember on the DQ thing, where we say this is the min, the max, and these are the different guidelines that we can get. Okay, and then we would go through a process of measuring the baseline performance. So baseline performance is really important. And part of this is to say, when we start our model, or just before we go into deployment, and we finally realize, okay, this model's correct. What we're talking about baseline performance there is the relationship between the features. Okay, so if you remember my previous discussion on FNLL or anomaly detection, I had 5 features: the claim amount, the age of the claimant, the number of previous claims, I can't remember them all at this point in time, but these features together determine whether the claim was can be predicted as a fraudulent claim or a non-fraudulent claim. So this baseline performance is basically measuring the relationship between these different features based on an incident type. So is it, if it's an accident claim, then it's got this structure and relationship. If it's a medical claim, then it's got this one. If it's a theft, if it's fire, and we have to document these relationships between the features that we go into the model. Can anyone tell me why it's so important to baseline the LLM or to baseline the AI model? Does anyone have an idea?
Well, you can't really judge the successfulness or even the performance of any model without having a baseline. You have to start somewhere, and once you have that, you can then determine where you've gone from there. Was it successful, or did it do what it was supposed to do? Did it answer the questions that were needed to be answered?
Okay, great. And that's certainly something that you'll keep on monitoring on a day-by-day basis. That where's the model compared to the baseline when it was accepted? Is the model deteriorating or is the model improving? So you've got that baseline, as Christy said. But the other aspect that's so important, some people call it ML drift or machine learning drift. I'm sure people have heard that term. One of the quality metrics is ML drift. Now, what ML drift is really telling you is that the relationship between the critical features of the machine learning model has changed. The environment has changed, so that those combinations or the baseline that we set, that's now different. So the feature shift has drifted. This can be over time. We may have an act that comes in, or we may have a catastrophic event like COVID that changes these relationships tremendously, where all of a sudden the number of previous claims has gone up a lot. That wasn't because we're being naughty, it's just because that was a catastrophic event. Something in the world caused a change in the relationship between these critical features. I'm hoping that made sense. Christy, can you see that measuring drift or measuring data drift is about understanding the relationship of the features as you go into the model, as the model goes into deployment?
Yeah, so what's funny is that I know ML drift because, when I create I created a propensity model, I put, things in place to monitor ML drift. But when you said LLMs, the ML part just went right out of my head. I was thinking in terms of, what, because I have not built an LLM yet. So I'm like, I'm going to think it's going to be similar, but not called ML drift.
Right. So we have that drift on that LLM as well, where.
But isn't that more so I haven't done this before. I haven't built an LLM yet. So that's something that I'm working on. So is it the same concept as ML drift when you're looking at an LLM?
Okay, so it tends not to be the same. Now, they use the same term. So remember, what we'll typically do is not build the LLM. We would make use of Copilot, ChatGPT, Claude, whatever it is. We'll make use of an LLM, and we would have some form of RAG interface up front that we are storing data. Christy, does that so are
Yes,
you
yes,
yeah, we're going to front end the LLM. Now, what will happen is that when we do that RAG and we're doing a lookup of the claims data, it's not going to be directly in our vector database. What we'll do is we'll pull that from our claims policy data. We'll pull it in, maybe your student scores or whatever that may be. We pull those details in for this current student, and you'd make a decision based on a training model of those scores or the features that were based on that as part of that chatbot. Does that make sense? So you're going to have a tiny model within that RAG system, and you'd ask for a rating or a judgment or a decision on this area.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, and I mean, one of the things that I've been looking into is how do you make sure that the data that the LLM is as top quality, right? Making sure that it is the best that it can possibly be, without adding bias.
Right.
And then training that, but so that's interesting. Okay, I need to learn a little bit more on how I would monitor that later on.
Okay, and that the Agentic score is sitting there as well, and that eval driven thing does talk about those different measurements that you have. Okay. All right. Now, once you're picking up problems, then of course we go through the root cause analysis as standard. But what we are doing now is introducing the quality of the model in terms of inappropriate complexity. Are we overfitting? Are we underfitting? Incorrect algorithm selection. So is this algorithm correct for this data and the shape of this data? Okay, then we talk about model drift or concept decay. That's where we have a feature or a concept that just disappears and it's no longer relevant. It was relevant and it's no longer relevant. And then our problem of we can't explain it anymore, or we can't interpret what that agent decided. Okay, so now we into this model analysis. Okay, but we're going through the same thing. We want to see, well, has our data bias, have we introduced data bias? Have we got the appropriate, the relationships between features? Do we understand where the data is coming from? Processes, ineffective model life cycle management. That's that crisp DM, taking the models into production and out of production. How are we handling all of that? Okay. Okay, so we have a question from SM. I'm so invested in this topic, yet I've lost recently enhanced the fraud detection, prevention, and investigation skills. Any recommendations? Where do I start? What I can do is I can spend some time with you afterwards in terms of understanding it. But what I like to do is, and I was sharing this with Paul Krobler, is how do we deal with all of these different machine learning techniques? And the other day I did a catalog and I came up with 180 different machine learning techniques. My recommendation is do not start off trying to learn all of the different techniques of machine learning. Okay, rather start off with, okay, my business needs me to build a use case for fraud detection or anomaly detection. Then what are the appropriate AI techniques to handle fraud detection? And things like one-class SVM, isolation forest, and autoencoders. Those are the techniques. So I'm hoping I'm helping you here as to don't go wide, but go very small. A business has this requirement for fraud detection. Let me look at what techniques are the best for this. And some of those techniques will require some training. So Christy, for example, the isolation forest, you have to actually train the anomaly detection on isolation forest before it can pass a judgment. And so you've got these little models that are running in as part of this fraud detection. And you can pick up the differences or things like that. Did that help you? So please don't start off trying to learn or trying to qualify in the CAP, to become a data scientist. I think the best thing is to say, given the appropriate business need, how do I use AI to help me resolve the business need? So you get a targeted learning experience and you don't try to deal with everything. There's just too much for us to pick up on.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, pleasure. All right, so then we go about improving the system. What are our different improved strategies? Okay, retrain the models. So if you've got that drift on the models, you'll need to retrain it and get a new set in. Now, some of these AI techniques, they don't need a massive amount of big training, right? So they can deal with small model training, and those ones are very fast and very quick, and you can retrain quickly and then bring it back into production. Look at the workflows and the traces. That's so if the agent, every single conversation that it has with anybody, it leaves a trace. It actually records the steps that it does. And you want to be able to evaluate that trace and say, well, did it follow the right workflow, follow the right path? Where did it go? And it's very helpful from a record keeping viewpoint that you understand what that agent did, what were the steps that it took. Okay. Prioritize improvements based on impact and efforts. cross-functional teams. This is what I'm finding so important at this point in time is we can no longer work in isolation. Records management, just deal with the record side of it. Data governance, just deal with the data side of it. AI, deal with the AI system or agentic areas. We have to work together as a team. And when we analyze a problem, we need to look at both of those issues together. And if you remember my ISO thing or that total quality management, we're talking about quality failures, quality control issues, and we come together and we do a root cause analysis on both of them together and look at that against our baseline. And we may need to re-establish a baseline. So once we've retrained, bring your baseline back again, and then you continue with the process. Okay. And then it's about control and standardizing it, model performance, data quality metrics, user feedback, system health. Okay. All of these areas we want to bring back in terms of that situation. Continuous monitoring, that SPC, those performance over trends, you're not going to get away from this. This is going to be what we refer to as offline monitoring. So offline monitoring will be the quality that we can collect the data and we'll measure it offline. Please remember that you've got that online quality as the chatbot is talking to the student or the person on the other side. That's what we refer to as online quality management, and it will be writing results away into an offline review. So we've got online and offline quality reviews. Okay. All right. So I found it very helpful to first of all understand the cycle of development. That's changed. Then build an appropriate total quality rubric to help me support and monitor and observe the platform. We're talking about observing both real time and offline when the data is being captured and stored away. But again, I start with a pilot project to get the feedback of the quality measures that you need to introduce from a model point of view. Make sure that the executives understand this process, that we need to, it's not a one and done type of situation. And it's not an act, it's a habit. So we're going to have to go around this thing. We have to create this all the time, understanding where we're at. Make sure we've got the right quality tools and regularly review the cadence of how often are we having to retrain the model? How often are we improving that process? Sorry, and that's it. Any questions? Any comments?
So I have a couple of questions, Howard, in regards to the AI governance part of this, right?
Yes.
Because so I have a data governance framework. We've already implemented it. It is working well.
Right.
Now we are, now we are getting into the AI part of this. We have tools that are being used. We are in the process of learning more about building LLMs, building AI agents, and so forth. And so my job is to make sure that we're governing this data. So the basics of governance, I get, right? But
Yes.
what am I missing on the AI part, or what do I need to be extremely concerned about on the AI part, besides the guardrails of making sure people don't put PII in and making sure that they understand the kind of data that they're using when they go into the systems and so forth?
So the big one that you haven't mentioned is the ethics side of it. Now, that's into that responsible AI. So you really need to focus on what are the current things that we need to review. For example, that NIST AI RMF, that risk management framework. Okay, this is the govern, map, message, and measure and manage. So these are the things that you need to be looking at. Can you see these risk management contributions? So what risk is the system? I don't know if you've seen that risk triangle that the EU AI Act has introduced. Christy, have you seen that?
Yeah, I have seen that. Yes.
Okay. So And then NIST AI RMF comes along and supports, when you get the triangle. So right at the top, you've got very risky AI implementations, and basically the thing is avoid those, do not go anywhere near them. So you have to do a risk management assessment as to where your application is, or what you're trying to do. So the business is trying to achieve, let's have a look at it. The business is trying to look at fraud cases, to manage all the fraud cases, or prevent revenue loss, or promote ethics and fraudulent payouts. You need to be able to see, well, is this business outcome that we're looking for potentially going to cause any harm to anybody that's out there, especially the catch-all fraud cases. Now, the easy one is to say, oh, well, that's part of business. We don't want to pay out on fraudulent cases. And we get that. You don't want to pay out on fraudulent cases, but if you are creating delays, and if you are causing challenges where the people have to go through extra checking, extra routines and stuff like that, you are causing an impact on the customer in terms of the way in which you're managing their claims. And that can lead to a whole lot of problems that you're introducing.
And saying that is very similar to our situation, because so we have to look about academic freedom, right? So
Yes.
we need to make sure that we're saying, yes, you can use the AI. However,
Right.
we need to also be cautious, right? We need to look at academic integrity. We need to look at the
100%.
ethics and the bias and so forth. So yes, so I look at it as the faculty and the students are our customer, and we don't want to disrupt quote business of education. We also don't want to disrupt academic freedom, but we also don't want to put the institutional assets, which is what we refer to our data as, institutional assets and information, at risk. So how do I balance both of those without jeopardizing academic freedom, without being so prescriptive, because we don't want to be as prescriptive, right? And I know one of the things that we're looking at is coming up with like a quote vetted list of, hey, here's things that we know are great, fine, perfect. You can use them, put them on your system, no problems. But it's also thinking about shadow systems. Like, how do I use the governance part to prevent people from like, oh, well, I didn't like any of those vetted ones, so I'm just going to do my own thing, kind of.
Right. Yeah, they somebody referred to it as that shadow AI when you introduce Copilot and everyone says we're not interested in Copilot, we're going to go and use ChatGPT because it's better or whatever it is, and then we have those challenges. So yeah, that's you have to look at putting those controls in place, and then it's a lot of it's about training and awareness in terms of making sure that people are aware of the challenges with using anything else and potentially exposing data to external areas that you can't control. So a lot of those things, but that's your typical change management that you have to go through.
Thanks. I really appreciate that. I think that some of it I kind of know, some of it I just kind of need to learn more about. Like it's not new territory so much as it is just making sure that we have kind of like all of our I's and dotted T's crossed, and that we've addressed most of it.
What I wanted to, this is the way I did it. I think I started off with, so that audit readiness was not part of it. Transparency was not. I basically started off with 2 or 3 outcomes of fraud cases, customer satisfaction, revenue loss, and fraudulent payouts. Okay. And then when I said, okay, now what are the controls that I need to put in place? So for a medical claim, okay, what would HIPAA want me to do? And you could then say, okay, based on the HIPAA things, these are the business outcomes that I need to introduce. Okay, and then I went to ISO 42000 and I went to NIST. So what you'll do is highlight a few of the regulations and frameworks that you want to adhere to, and then when you have a business case that comes about, say, okay, this is very nice. This is what the business wants to achieve, and this is the benefit to the customer, and this is what we want to get out. But what are the other areas that I need to check? Does that make sense?
Yeah, total sense. Because think we do have to be aware of HIPAA, right? We also have to be aware of
Yeah.
GDPR. We also have to be aware of the EU.
Yeah.
So we do have all of these different, I would say, regulations and laws and internal
Right.
policies as well as external policies. And so this, I have to say, I've done rubrics for a long time in higher education. This is probably my favorite use case. This is a great way of being able to help other people to
Yes.
understand what we're doing as well.
Fantastic. So
Thank you.
what I can do is I can actually share with you. I've got a conversation script with Copilot where I put my original rubric and then I say, okay, now then I introduce a HIPAA control and the HIPAA document. Then I say, okay, compare the two and do I have enough quality checks? What is missing? And so I take it through basically one framework at a time. I'm sure at some stage I'll try to automate all of it, but it was quite a process, but it got me to think a lot, especially at the document management, accountability and record keeping. Okay. And what struck me was things like accountability. There's a quality metric, but then there's an audit control. The quality metric says, oh, okay, I've got 100% of the record processes defined, but then this owner, the assigned owner, are they doing their job? So I need to go and audit the owner in terms of the work that they're doing. So there was a difference between I've got some quality checks in my rubric, but then I've also got audit checks that I need to do.
Yes. And audits. We were talking about this yesterday in the meeting about, we already believe we have a records retention issue and we need to do an audit on that because we know that people are getting data, but they're only supposed to keep that quote data maybe for 6 months or 3 months or something. Are they even deleting it off of their system? Because if they're not, that's something. So how do I introduce those audit checks into that process? And that's just one example of what I know what we need to do, especially in record keeping.
Yep. And then now, especially that if you start using an AI and a RAG system to store those documents, Christy, you bring the documents in and you're going to do a language check on the document. So if someone submits let's talk about your case is relatively easy. I submit a paper. I will bring that paper into a RAG database, not into the public one. I bring it into a RAG database, and then I would go through the appropriate turn me in type of validations. You spoke about that academic freedom. So I'd be doing that in my rubric, in my RAG, sorry, not my rubric, in my RAG. Then I have to manage the content in that RAG. I have to make sure, well, can I go and get the document back out from that RAG the way it was submitted to be able to explain to the person what they did wrong? I'm hoping that makes sense.
Oh, total sense. Yes.
Okay. Yes, Eddie. Sorry, I haven't answered you for a while.
Yes. So my question is more to do with. So you know how real world changes are happening over time.
Yes.
My question is, how do we have like an early warning system to detect when our AI model's performance is, starting to degrade, so that we can fix it before the users notice a problem? I don't know if my question.
Yeah, so that was part of the checks that we had in terms of the baseline checks. So before the model, before the model goes into production, okay, or it gets deployed, we would take a baseline check in terms of the the data that's going in. So I need to baseline my data, my source data. If there's drift on the data, if there's data biases, I have a challenge. Then when you look at the model or the different type of AI that you're using, different AI techniques have different levels of confidence as to whether they've given you the right answer. Eddie, does that make sense? So there's actually hallucination checks within the LLM to see, well, what level of creativity did I add to this? And those are the types of things that you're going to be measuring on an ongoing basis. Isolation forest has the check on isolation forest is the number of trees that we use to evaluate it. And each time I run an anomaly detection on isolation forest, I need to pick up that measurement and see how it's performing. Does that make sense?
A little bit. Maybe let me just give you an example.
Yeah.
So I'm based in East Africa, Uganda. So
Mhm.
maybe I could just say, for example, now in Uganda here, credit scoring is not
Right.
the traditional, not done in the traditional way. There's what we call alternative credit scoring, where
Right.
I'm sure you've heard about it. So, for example, let's say there's a startup, they've deployed an LLM in a local data center to perform alternative credit scoring, and obviously, yes, it analyzes the non-traditional information and provides microloans to small businesses, right? So now the challenge is, let's say like a major event happens, let's say 2 years down the road. Maybe an example I can give is maybe there's like a drought in a region and it causes a significant drop.
A catastrophic event. We call them catastrophic events. Yeah.
Yes, and then so now that event sort of kind of makes the metrics, should I say, not reliable anymore. So how would that startup see
that's a good example of a data drift. Now let me try to explain. If I use my insurance claim process, one of my features was number of previous claims. Okay. Now, when I first of all trained my model, an anomaly or the mean would be, let's say for accident, the mean was 3, for fire, the mean was 1, for medical, the mean was 5, as an example. So now, when we have a catastrophic event, we can have many claims coming in, and all of a sudden it changes the distribution and the structure of the claims data. Okay, and you will see that as the data is getting added, as we keep on getting more and more claims to the system, the relationship between those critical features has changed. And that's what you start picking up early on, is that you've had a change from the baseline. That critical event caused a change in the baseline on the number of claims, the amount of the claims, that also increased. So all of a sudden you've had, some of these incidents, we call them, like we have a grouping called other. Now, COVID would be an other because you probably didn't know about it. And then all of a sudden, the mean of claims around other went really high. And you pick up a change on that, the mean and standard deviation, or what we refer to as the Z score. Does that help you, Eddie?
Yes, that it guides me in the process at least.
So what I do is when you train a model, you take something like, let's just give an example. I take 70% of the data that has no anomalies. I then test on 20%, and then I do a further production test on 10% of the data. Now, you would record the Z scores for each incident type that the features have. What is the relationship there? And you would constantly monitor that structure of the data. You almost like using a histogram. What is the relationship comparison between these different features? When that changes, you know that you have to go through a process of retraining your model. Eddie, we
Okay.
can
Yes,
probably spend some time on, let's try to spend some time together, and we can talk through that.
Okay, but the histogram analogy really,
Yes.
it's actually
Yeah.
painted
And if you need to, you can ask Tariq. He's online. He'll tell you everything about credit scoring. Tariq?
Hi, Howard.
Hi, Tariq. Yeah, so Tariq also works with a credit scoring company in Saudi, but so he can help you. Tariq, I'm putting you on the spot.
Hi, sure, no problem. We can discuss on this.
Okay, fantastic. All right, great. Okay, any other questions? Any comments, questions? What I did want to show you was I actually then went up. I tried to catalog all of these AI techniques. I really got into trouble with different techniques and purposes, and I could never get a tree hierarchy of all of the different types of AI techniques. And so what I recognize is that we have all of these different categorizations or taxonomies of techniques, but they cross over. One's by capability, one's by environment, by function, by purpose, by technique, deep learning, machine learning, symbolic AI, and things like that. So my big learning here was, whilst I was cataloging all of these techniques that I'm aware of, was that the way in which we group techniques together to do the job that we need depends on, the structure that we have within our taxonomy. So here is a set of deep learning. Deep learning is also the thing that supports the LLMs, and we have other types of approaches. Where's the other one? Gen AI. There's transformers. So we have transformers sitting here and within deep learning, where we use a different approach. Yes, Hilton.
Thanks, Howard. This is a wonderful topic. So I think mine is just going to be a follow-up question based on the previous question you have just had now. Just as an add-on question, I think what I'm quite interested in is that how do I know that my deployed model has a data drift without having to think of whether there is a catastrophic event that happened, because that will, in a sense, depend on my knowledge that, okay, I know that there is a drought, there's a flood that happened at this particular place. But what method or techniques can I put in place to keep monitoring the model, or evaluating the model without having to do it manually? In a sense, are there any best practice methodologies that one can put in place, like schedule the evaluation of the model, or have the model retrained at a particular schedule? Like, how would I know that, or how can I implement something that evaluates and give me alerts that the model is experiencing a shift in the data, or in one of the key features?
Okay, so all right, let me try to. So it's all about establishing the baseline. Before the model is deployed, you would have, let's say your model is dependent on 5 features. Hilton, are you comfortable? When I use the term feature could be, if it's an insurance claim, it could be, as an example, the claim amount, the type of incident, the age of the claimant, number of previous claims, and let's say you've got 6 features that dictate and help the model decide whether you've got a fraudulent claim or not. Are you comfortable with
Yes.
that? Okay. Now,
Yes.
when you load that before, just as you go into production, you will take a snapshot of the relationship of the Z scores of those different features. Okay, I'm going to
Yes.
just open something up, and you will record that, and you're going to take a stamp on that thing, so that every day or every week when you run it, you're going to recalculate the Z scores. Using the same technique of when you split the data set, you'd recalculate the Z scores and say, has there been any significant shift on the Z scores that I have now compared to what the Z scores looked like? Here's an example. Okay, there's a Z score. Okay, claim amount, claim duration, claimant age. Now I can actually do this every day and say, well, what is the mean and what is the differences that I had? There's an example. There's a bell curve for the claim amount or the claim, so I can then say, well, has it moved from this? Has this changed? There's my snapshot. There's my baseline. Every day I run it and say, well, has it changed? Has the deviation changed? Does that make sense?
Yes, I'm following. Yes, yeah.
Okay, so you would constantly, and that's why the Z score is so important. You standardize it, and you calculate this thing, and then you can calculate the density that it has, and where is that distribution or the peak, and where is the outliers and things like that. And if that changes on a weekly, daily basis, you can then go and say, oh, something's wrong. I need to retrain my model.
No, okay, no, that makes sense. So I thought maybe there is like a tool else that one can use to keep track of that. But if that's the best or the standard approach that one can take, then
Look,
I think we are
you
like,
do
thanks a lot
have
for that. Yeah.
you've got other things, Hilton. For example, explainability, right? So what you could be doing is you can be tagging your claims that have been done, and then you have to do an explainability. And there are a set of techniques on explainability. One's called SHAP, and the other one's called LIME. And you can check, well, oh shucks, can this tool explain why this is an anomaly? And if it can't explain, then you know that something has changed.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, thanks a lot. Yeah, it makes sense now.
Okay, so if this anomaly, if this routine says this is an anomaly and I can't explain it, you've got some problems there.
No, okay. No, thanks. That really helps. Yeah.
Okay. Great. Thanks everybody. Thanks for the time. Appreciate the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Howard.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Awesome.
Howard.
Thanks, Howard.
Great
Thanks,
great
Howard.
session. Loved it.
Right.
thank you very much. Alrighty.